welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Malin and I talk about everything related to eating disorder recovery and healing the relationship with your own body, with food and with movement. And today I want to talk about my own recovery journey because I did get a lot of comments and I'm always so grateful for all your comments, all your DMs, so please continue doing that. And a lot of people asked me, hey, can you share your story? And I actually did share my story in 2 videos before, but that was actually my whole eating disorder story. And of course, I also touched on my recovery story. But today I want to dive deeper into my own recovery story. Because a lot of people think that recovery must have been so easy for me, because here I am helping other people with recovering. I actually started my own coaching business and I give all those tips and I seem to be so confident about myself. And while that is true for the most part, and of course I do have days where I'm not confident. Of course I have things about myself that I'm insecure about, and that is just human. That is like what every human being experiences. But while that all is true, my recovery was everything but simple. It was everything but easy. If you would talk to my mom, who was actually very close to me during that time and extremely helpful, she could tell you that this was not an easy road. Also, a little side note, if you hear some meowing, my little cat is just sleeping next to me and she makes some sounds while she's sleeping. So I hope that doesn't bother you guys. Baby! Well, someone just woke up. And while I normally don't do that, I just want to show you where those noises are coming from. Back to the topic. Recovery was not an easy road for me. I was sick with anorexia for 10 years. And of course, during those 10 years, a lot of behaviors, beliefs, structures, all of that were paved deeply into my brain. And it can be very hard to actually change old behaviors, to change old belief systems, because your brain can rewire, but it takes a lot of time. And when I was in the depth of my eating disorder, I actually did not believe that I could ever recover, that I could ever accept my body with more weight, that I could ever live a happy life without all those rigid routines that I had. And little disclaimer, of course I can, because now I'm living a life that is so much happier than I would ever expect it to be. I actually started recovery when I got my green card, which was by the end of 2021. And I always knew that I wanted to move to America. And I always knew that once I moved to America, I really want to start living. Deep down, I knew that I was just existing. Deep down, I knew that I would hurt people around me, that I would always cancel plans, that I never really lived as free as I could without my eating issues. So after moving to New York, I actually sought help and I started working with a recovery coach, which was extremely helpful because even though I had a great therapist before, it was different. In therapy, we would talk about everything of my childhood and family related and, all those therapy topics. With my coaching, we would mainly concentrate on my eating disorder behaviors. Of course, we would touch on where certain beliefs come from sometimes, and we would do some exercises that also had to do with, for instance, family issues or other things that we would also talk about in therapy. But we would mainly concentrate on my urge to move and on my eating behaviors. And it was so helpful to have someone who allowed me to eat. And I know that might sound weird for some people, but it will probably also sound very familiar for a lot of other people. It was so helpful for me to have someone who was like, no, I will actually give you the homework now to eat lunch tomorrow, and after a couple of weeks to eat breakfast. And that was so freeing to me to kind of give up this responsibility. Just for a while, I knew that I eventually had to take responsibility for my own actions, but just for the beginning, to give up some responsibility and to have someone who was like, you have to eat this and this and this and this meal and those snacks without counting calories. Because counting calories was something that was one of my biggest habits in recovery. I had a very set number that I would never go over, and so getting rid of that number and actually getting rid of the scale and not counting my calories anymore was scary, but also super freeing. And of course, I had just moved to a new country, to a completely new continent even. So there was excitement, there was this urge to explore, there was this urge to try new things, but there was also my eating disorder still holding me back. And this was why my start in New York was actually pretty hard for me. It was pretty rough. I actually found great friends very quickly, and I wasn't even alone with all of my struggles, but it was still tougher than I expected. This is why I first moved to California then to see my aunt, because I figured having some family around would be a little bit more helpful. But my habits and my behaviors and all the beliefs and all the things I had started doing in my eating disorder was still so strong. So even though I had started to eat more and I had limited my movement more, I was extremely fragile around money. So while in Germany I had all my little side gigs and all my little jobs which allowed me to earn more money, in America I didn't have that anymore. I had given all of that up. And while I have done that because I knew that my obsession with working and with making money wasn't healthy, that actually made me panic when I lived in California. And so after another month, I actually decided to go back to Germany just for a while because my depression was like through the roof. I was diagnosed with depression many, many years ago. But after starting to eat and actually letting my body rest a little bit more, all those emotions came up, which is actually something I see in so many of my clients, which is something that is very, very common. A lot of people who start working on their eating disorders all of a sudden have all those emotions. When I was in the depth of my eating disorder, the main emotions I would feel were being proud of like a certain number of steps I had done or a low number on the scale, or rage or anger, and mostly against myself. I was mostly angry about how my body looked like. I would feel rage when I didn't walk enough. I would feel rage when I felt like my body had changed. But it wasn't like a big palette of emotions. It was more like some very specific emotions that I would feel here and there. And of course there were more emotions in between, but everything was just very numb, which I didn't even notice when I was in the depth of my eating disorder because it became so normal. But once I started recovering, all those emotions, all of them, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, the sadness, the regret, all those emotions came up. And you might notice that I mentioned mainly quote unquote negative emotions, which is also something we see often in recovery. So all those emotions came up, and I felt like everything I was feeling was just heavy. The world felt heavy to me. And while before I always had my routines, I had my things, I had my little dopamine highs at the end of the day where I had collected all my steps and I had quote unquote earned my food, that was always a moment of dopamine high for me when I could finally eat. Because yes, I loved eating. It was never about not wanting to eat. I always wanted to eat. I was just so afraid of gaining weight. So that little dopamine high was gone completely because now I allowed myself to eat. I allowed myself to rest. I had deleted my step counter. So I had a very hard time finding something else that would make me feel that way. And today I know that there are a billion ways to feel that way. You don't need that cheap dopamine high anymore. There are so many things that will give you a way happier way of living. But during that time, I didn't know that. And I didn't really have anyone who would tell me that. I did watch videos on YouTube and I did watch people who talked about their recovery stories, which was very helpful. But even the clinic I went to because of my depression back then was not very helpful in that regard. A lot of therapists and doctors who worked in the clinic didn't have any idea of eating disorders. And some actually said very, very harmful things to me, which actually made me take a step back in my recovery and never really led to like a big relapse, but it did lead to some days where I wanted to go back and then where I would eat less again and where I would like walk around more again. And this often was related to something professionals had said to me, which is why I started to realize that not every therapist is right for you. And after being discharged from the clinic, actually everything started to become a little bit better. That was probably like 9 months into recovery, and at this point my brain slowly started to rewire. I still struggled a lot with my body image. I still struggled a lot with accepting myself. Eating certain foods was not really the biggest problem anymore. It was more accepting my body. Every day I was hoping for my overshoot weight to go down, which is why I made another video about this topic and why you should not wait for your overshoot weight to go down. Because first of all, for me, that was never something I should have waited for because it would always get in the way of actually accepting myself the way I am. And second of all, you never know if it's overshoot weight, if it will go down, when it will go down. For a lot of people, it takes so much longer than they think. And so just like working on body acceptance and not waiting for overshoot weight to go down would be one of my biggest tips. And of course, that is easier said than done. But at that time, I also started to date again. I noticed that people would actually want to go on dates with me, that people were actually interested in me, even though I saw myself as this ugly person, as this person that nobody would ever love. But still, people were interested in me. And while you should never, ever attach your worth or your value to other people, for me, it was helpful to understand I might see myself differently than other people see me. It is different when your parents or your closest family or your closest friends tell you you are beautiful. I'm very, very, very sure that they are not lying to you and that they really believe that. But it hits different if they say it to you, because sometimes we're like, well, you're my mom, you have to say this. And again, I'm pretty sure your mother believes that if she's saying that to you, but it is different if somebody you don't even know is like, oh yeah, you're very attractive, I want to go on a date with you. And so during that time, I like slowly found my energy again. I slowly started doing the things I always loved doing. I also like explored new things about myself. Because I was stuck in my eating disorder for so long, I kind of had forgotten who I really was. And that actually led to a little identity crisis, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you people know too. I didn't even know who I was when I first started recovery, because all I had done for 10 years was trying to do the things to make my eating disorder be happy. And so I didn't really know what to do when I was not walking around all the day, when I was not looking for low-calorie recipes or spending hours in the supermarket to find the lowest calorie foods. I was not doing that anymore. And so I was like, what am I doing now? Who am I? What can I do? What can't I do? And so that year was actually a year of exploring for me. I started to try so many new things. I went out again. I met friends again. I went to a concert again. I started to spend time with all those friends who were there all those years, who are always there for me and who still were there for me. And at this point, if any of you guys is watching this, I also want to say thank you, because I know how hard it must have been for you guys, but having you guys around, especially when I was in my recovery, was so helpful, because that allowed me to get a break from my recovery, even just for a couple of hours when I was at the concert or at the show or going out with friends or dancing. I started to dance again and go to clubs again just to dance. While I was doing that, it allowed me to just get a break from my recovery, to just have my head somewhere else, to just think about other things. And of course, I was still struggling. I would still have phases where things were going downhill a little bit more, and where I struggled with my body more, and where I was thinking maybe I should do another diet. Maybe I should change my food a little bit more. Maybe I should start working out. But I somehow always got back on track. And I also had, after the clinic, I had a great therapist who was very helpful and who was like, you will never do a diet again. And I'm telling you right now, you can never do a diet again. And this was somehow so relieving to me, because deep down I didn't want to do another diet. I was so done with dieting, but it was my eating disorder that was like, maybe if you lose a little bit weight, you might be happier. And so having a therapist who was like, no, this is nothing you will ever be able to do again, was actually such a big relief to me. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to just continue doing what I'm doing and trust my body that it will find its own way, its own set point, if you will. And so that's what I did. And the next summer in 2023, I actually moved to California again. I wanted to give it another try, and of course I was super nervous. I was so nervous of things going backwards again, of my depression flaring up again, but that was not the case. It was actually a completely new start. I was so grateful to be able to live here now, and also to be able to eat all those foods for the very first time ever. Because when I came to California for the first time, this was over 10 years ago, and so my eating disorder just started. And so when I moved here in 2023, that was the first time I could actually eat freely. I started to make new friends, I started to try new things. And even though some things might be a little bit more difficult here in the US compared to Germany, because we have a completely different social system, my life here started to feel so much better and so much freer. And I am so happy that I now have other problems. And this might sound weird for a moment, but having the problems I had when I had my eating disorder were life-threatening. Having the problems I have now, that every grown-up person has, or not. It's not fun, but sometimes I'm like, I'd rather have this problem than being stuck in my eating disorder again. I have so much headspace now. As you guys know, I started a first training this year, which I already finished, and I'm currently doing a second training. And I also started working with clients already, and I'm like building my own coaching business. I have written 2 books about eating disorder recovery. I've done a lot of research, and I'm constantly educating myself. And I am so happy and grateful to be able to just sit there and read and learn and to educate myself, because my brain was so caught up with my eating disorder and I had so much brain fog because I was simply not eating enough that I never really could sit down for a couple of hours and learn. This made it extremely hard for me to even go to college and finish my master's degree. I actually have a master's in pedagogic and psychology, so even while I was doing my master's degree, I was very aware of all those things. I just couldn't even change them. And this is something I see in so many people. They are so aware of what's going on. They are so aware of their eating disorders, and still changing feels impossible. And so let me just tell you, changing can be very hard, especially if you spend a lot of time with your eating disorders, especially when all those thoughts and behaviors are paced into your brain so deeply. It can feel impossible. And I'm not gonna lie, recovery feels very hard. I was struggling so badly. I had so many dark thoughts. I always felt like I'm doing worse in recovery than I did before. But I still recovered, and I'm still fully recovered. And I'm standing here now and telling you this story because I know that it can feel so dismotivating to be in recovery and to be like, this feels like a scam. Everything feels worse now. And I can tell you right now, I had the same feeling, but I would overcome it by sticking with recovery. And so you can do this too. So if you're ever struggling, please do yourself a favor and stick with recovery. Please continue doing what you're doing. I know that it can feel wrong. I know that your body changes. I know that your body might feel heavier. I know that all those things you believed were true now turn out to not be true, and that can be very, very hard. But that doesn't mean that you can't recover. And if you need some more support, it is always great to reach out to a coach, to a therapist, or to anyone else who might be able to help you. You don't have to do this alone. There are so many resources out there that can help you recover. So please do yourself a favor, to do the people around you a favor, and please give yourself the chance of recovering. I really hope this video helped a few of you guys. As always, please leave a comment and let me know how you like this video, and also if you would like me to cover any other topics. Also, if you like this video, please leave a like or maybe subscribe, because that helps me to reach more people who might also struggle with their recovery. I will see you guys in the next one, and thank you so much for watching.